The massive alien ship hung in space like a dark cloud, blocking out the stars. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Aurora Dawn, watching the enemy vessel through the main screen. His hands gripped the railing as he tried to stay calm. The ship was 3 times bigger than his own vessel, and he could see weapon ports along its hull. "Sir, they're sending us a message," said Lieutenant Amy Brooks from her position at the communications desk. Her voice shook slightly as she spoke. Jake nodded, put it through. The screen flickered, and suddenly a tall alien appeared before them. The creature had pale blue skin and 4 arms, with large black eyes that seemed to look right through Jake. When it spoke, the voice was deep and cold. "I am Commander Vex Thera of the Zephyrian Empire. You have entered our territory without permission. Your primitive species will surrender immediately or face destruction." Jake stepped forward, keeping his voice steady. "This is Captain Morrison of the human exploration ship Aurora Dawn. We're operating under Galactic Exploration. Rights. This sector isn't claimed by any empire according to our star charts." The alien's eyes narrowed. "Your charts are wrong, human. The Zephyrian Empire has ruled this galaxy for 3,000 years. We decide who may travel these stars, and your kind has no place here." Behind Jake, his crew of 25 men and women watched nervously. They were explorers, not fighters. The Aurora Dawn carried scientific equipment and supplies for a 6-month mission to map new star systems. They had no heavy weapons and couldn't fight a ship like the one facing them. "We don't want any trouble," Jake said. "We're just here to explore and learn. Maybe we can work something out." Commander Vexathura made a sound that might have been laughter. "Work something out? Your species thinks it can negotiate with us? We have destroyed civilizations that were advanced before your world even had fire." The alien walked closer to the screen, and Jake could see other creatures moving behind him. They all looked similar, with the same pale blue skin and 4 arms.
Oh.
Some wore what looked like military uniforms covered in strange symbols. However, the commander continued, "We are not without mercy. We will give your species one chance to prove it deserves to exist in our galaxy. There is an old test we use for primitive races like yours." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "What kind of test?" "Call it the regression protocol. It's very simple. You take 10 of your best people and 10 of ours. We drop them on a world with nothing but basic clothes. They must survive for 30 days using only primitive tools and methods. No technology, no advanced equipment, just their hands and minds." The alien's black eyes seemed to glow with confidence. "If your people win, we will consider allowing humans to explore this sector. If we win, your species will leave our territory forever and never return." Jake looked around at his crew. Lieutenant Brooks was pale, and Engineer Mike Foster was. Shaking his head slowly, they all knew what this meant. If they refused, the alien ship would probably destroy them. If they accepted, they might have a chance. "And if we refuse this test," Jake asked, "then we destroy your ship and report too. The Empire that humans are too aggressive to be allowed in our space. More ships will come, and your colonies will be eliminated." The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's systems. Jake knew he didn't have much choice. Even if they could somehow escape this alien ship, more would come, at least. This test gave humanity a chance. "What world would this test take place on?" Jake asked. "Zarian Prime. It's a harsh world, but not impossible to survive on. Many species have taken this test there. Most fail within the first week." Commander Vexthera seemed to enjoy saying this. Behind him, other aliens were making sounds that might have been laughter. They clearly thought this would be easy. "Rules are simple," the commander continued. 10 people from each side. They're dropped at opposite ends of a large continent. They can bring nothing but basic clothing. No weapons, no tools, no food or water. They must find everything they need. To survive on the planet? Jake thought quickly. He knew some of his crew had military backgrounds, and a few had grown up in rural areas. But surviving on an alien world with nothing would be incredibly difficult. "How do we know you'll keep your word?" Jake asked. "How do we know you won't? Just destroy us anyway?" The alien's expression didn't change. Because the Zephyrian Empire has honor. We have used this test for over 1,000 years. It's how we determine if a species has the strength to exist alongside us. Many races have passed and are now part of our empire. How many have failed? Most of them. Your species shows promise in some ways, but you're still very primitive. You've barely left your home system. We've watched you fight among yourselves over small pieces of land. You destroy your own environment for temporary gain. These are not the actions of advanced people. Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he pushed it down. Getting angry wouldn't help his crew or his species. So what happens to the people who take the test? Win or lose, survivors return safely. This test is about proving strength and adaptability, not about killing, though many do die from the harsh conditions. The commander turned away from the screen for a moment, speaking in his own language to someone Jake couldn't see. When he turned back, his expression was even more confident. We've already selected our team. 10 of our finest military officers and scientists. They've been trained in survival techniques and primitive living. They know how to make fire, find water, and build shelter. Do your people have such knowledge? Jake thought about his crew. Some of them probably did have basic survival skills, but he wasn't sure how they would compare to aliens who had trained specifically for this kind of test. We need time to prepare our team and contact our government. You have 6 hours. Your people and send us their names. We'll meet at Zarian Prime in 3 days. Don't try to run, human. Our ships are faster than yours, and we have sensors that can track you anywhere in this sector. The screen went black, leaving Jake and his crew in tense silence. For a long moment, nobody spoke, and Lieutenant Brooks cleared her throat. Sir, what are we going to do? Jake rubbed his face with both hands. He felt tired suddenly, as if the weight of his entire species was on his shoulders. In a way, it was. We're going to put together the best team we can and hope they can survive. 30 days on an alien world? Engineer Foster stepped forward. Captain, with respect, this sounds like a trap. How do we know they won't just kill our people once they're on the planet? We don't, Jake admitted. But if we refuse, they'll definitely kill all of us right now. At least this way some of us might survive. He looked around at his crew, seeing fear and uncertainty in their faces. These were good people, scientists, and explorers who had signed up to study stars and planets, not to fight for the survival of their species. Start going through the personnel files, Jake ordered. We need people with military training, survival skills, medical knowledge, anything. That might help. And send a priority message to Earth Command. They need to know what's happening here. As his crew began working, Jake stared out at the alien ship. 3,000 years, the commander had said. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. They had probably faced hundreds of species and won every time, but they'd never faced humans before. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the communication room of the Aurora Dawn, waiting for the connection to Earth Command. The message had taken 12 hours to reach Earth, and the reply would take another 12 hours to come back. But he couldn't wait that long. The alien deadline was approaching fast. Sir, we've got the personnel files ready, said Lieutenant Amy Brooks, holding a datapad. I found 15 crew members with some kind of survival training or outdoor experience. Jake took the pad and started reading. The names and backgrounds scrolled past his eyes, but he felt lost. How do you choose 10 people to represent all of humanity? How do you pick who lives or dies? What about Ben Clark? Amy asked, pointing to a name on the list. He was a Marine sergeant for 8 years before joining the Exploration Corps. It says, here he did survival training in deserts and mountains. Jake nodded. Ben was a good choice. He was calm under pressure and knew how to lead people. Put him on the list. What else do we have? Lisa Hayes worked as a park ranger on Earth for 10 years before becoming a biologist. She knows about plants and animals, plus she's done wilderness survival courses. Good at her, too. They went through the list slowly. Danny Price was a geologist who had spent years camping in remote areas studying rock formations. Kate Williams had grown up on a farm and knew about hunting and fishing. Rick Palmer was an engineer who had built his own house in the mountains. Using basic tools as they worked, Jake noticed something interesting. Almost all of his crew members had some kind of outdoor experience. Even the ones who worked in labs or offices had stories about camping trips, hiking, or hunting with their families. "Lieutenant Brooks," Jake said, "run a check on the entire crew. I want to know everyone's outdoor experience, no matter how small." "Yes, sir." While Amy worked, Jake watched the alien ship through the window. It hadn't moved from its position, but he could see smaller ships moving around it. The Zephyrians were probably preparing their own team. An hour later, Amy returned with surprising news. "Sir, you're not going to believe this. Out of our 25 crew members, 22 have some kind of wilderness experience. Most of them went camping or hiking regularly back on Earth." Jake stared at the numbers. "That seems like a lot." "I thought so too, so I checked the records for other exploration ships. It's the same everywhere. People who sign up for deep space missions usually love outdoor activities. They like challenges and new experiences. This was unexpected." Jake had assumed that finding 10 people with survival skills would be difficult. Instead, he had to choose from more than 20 qualified candidates. "There's something else, sir," Amy continued. "I found some interesting files about the Zephyrian Empire. Intelligence reports from other sectors." Jake leaned forward. "What kind of reports?" "They've used this survival test dozens of times. Most species fail badly. The reports say that advanced civilizations usually lose all their primitive skills. After a few thousand years, they become dependent on technology and forget how to survive without it. But we haven't forgotten." "No, sir. Humans still go camping for fun. We hunt, fish, hike, and climb mountains because we enjoy it. Most of us learn basic survival skills in school or from our families." Jake felt a small spark of hope. Maybe humanity had a better chance than he'd thought. The next few hours were busy. Jake selected his final team of 10 people, making sure to include different skills. Ben Clark would be the leader. Lisa Hayes knew about plants and medicine. Danny Price understood geology and could find water. Kate Williams was an expert hunter and tracker. Rick Palmer could build tools and shelters. The other 5 team members were chosen for their different abilities. Tom Rogers was a medic who could treat injuries. Susan Miller was a botanist who could identify poisonous plants. Andy Chen was a former firefighter who understood rescue techniques. Maria Santos was a communications expert who could organize the team. Carl Johnson was a chef who knew how to prepare and preserve food. As Jake reviewed the final list, he felt more confident. This was a good team with a wide range of skills. Meanwhile, the Zephyrian ship was also preparing. Jake could see the aliens moving around on their vessel, probably getting ready for the challenge. He wondered what their team would look like. 2 days later, both ships arrived at Zarian Prime. The planet looked hostile from space. With brown and gray continents under a pale sky, 2 suns hung in the distance, promising extreme heat during morning. The day Commander Vexthera contacted the Aurora Dawn again. "Human Captain, are you ready to begin the test?" "We're ready," Jake replied, though his stomach was tight with worry. "Good, we'll meet on the planet's surface to review the rules and drop off both teams." Jake, his 10 team members, and 2 observers took a shuttle down to the planet. The surface was even more harsh than it had looked from space. Rocky ground stretched in all directions, with strange plants growing in scattered patches. It was thin and smelled of sulfur. The Zephyrian shuttle landed nearby, and 10 aliens emerged. They were all tall and lean, with the same pale blue skin as their commander. Jake could see that they wore simple gray clothes. It's just like the human team Commander Vexthera approached with 2 other aliens. "These are my chosen warriors," he said proudly. "Admiral Kethmer has led successful military campaigns on 12. World's Dr. Yolandra is our finest scientist, an expert in survival techniques and primitive technology." Jake looked at the alien team, stood in perfect formation like soldiers on parade. Their faces showed no emotion, and they held themselves with the confidence of people who expected to win. "These are our people," Jake said, gesturing to his team. The aliens looked at the humans with obvious disappointment. Ben Clark was shorter than any of the Zephyrians, and Lisa Hayes looked small next to the alien warriors. The human team didn't stand in formation. Instead, They were looking around at the landscape, pointing at different plants and rock formations. "These are your finest warriors?" asked Admiral Kethmer in a voice full of doubt. "There are survivors," Jake replied. Commander Vexthera explained the rules again. Each team would be dropped at opposite ends of a large valley. They had to survive for 30 days with no outside help. The teams couldn't contact each other or their ships. Observer drones would watch from a distance but wouldn't interfere. "Any questions?" Commander asked. Ben Clark stepped forward. "What about the local wildlife? Are there dangerous animals?" "Some, but a competent team should be able to avoid them." Lisa Hayes raised her hand. "Are any of the plants poisonous?" "Many of them. You'll have to learn which ones are safe." Questions continued for several minutes. Jake noticed that his team was asking practical questions about water, shelter, and food. The alien team stood silently, as if they already knew everything they needed to know. Finally, it was time to begin. The two teams climbed into separate transport vehicles that would take them to their starting positions. As Jake watched his people disappear into the distance, he felt a mixture of pride and fear. Back on the Aurora Dawn, Jake waited in the observation room. Large screens showed feeds from the drones following both teams. He could watch his people's progress, but he couldn't help them. The first surprise came within hours. While the Zephyrian team was still discussing strategy and examining their surroundings, the human team was already working. Ben Clark had organized them into pairs, focusing on a different survival need. Lisa Hayes and Danny Price were looking for water. Kate Williams and Tom Rogers were hunting for food. Wick, Palmer and Andy Chen were gathering materials for shelter. The others were exploring the area and making plans. "They're moving fast," observed Lieutenant Brooks, who was watching the screens with Jake. "Maybe too fast," Jake worried. "They might be using up too much energy." But as the hours passed, Jake began to see something remarkable. His team wasn't just surviving, they were thriving. They found water quickly, built efficient shelters, and even started a fire before sunset. The Zephyrian team, meanwhile, was struggling. Despite their advanced knowledge, they were having trouble with basic tasks. Their fire-making attempts failed repeatedly, and they couldn't agree on the best location for their shelter. "This is interesting," Jake said, watching the screens. "Very interesting." As night fell on Zarian Prime, Jake realized that maybe, just maybe, humanity had a chance after all. The first morning on Zarian Prime came with brutal heat. The two suns rose slowly over the rocky landscape, turning the sky from dark purple to bright orange. Within an hour, the temperature climbed from freezing cold to scorching hot. Ben Clark woke his team before dawn. He had learned long ago that the early hours were the best time to work in desert conditions. As the other humans stirred in their makeshift shelters, he could already feel the heat building. "Everyone up," Ben said quietly. "We need to get water and finish our shelter before it gets too hot to work." The human team moved quickly and efficiently. During their first night, they had managed to build basic windbreaks using rocks and branches from the strange local plants. It wasn't much, but it had kept them warm when the temperature dropped after sunset. Lisa Hayes had found a small stream, about half a mile from their camp during the previous evening. Now she led Danny Price and Tom Rogers back to the water source. With containers they had made from large leaves, "The water looks clean," Lisa said, kneeling by the stream. "We should still boil it to be safe." Danny examined the rocks along the stream. "This is good. The water's flowing over granite, which means it's been filtered naturally. Look here." He pointed to green stains on some stones. "These minerals mean the water should be safe to drink." While the water team worked, Kate Williams and Andy Chen explored the area around their camp. Kate had grown up hunting with her father and knew how to read animal signs. Within an hour, she had found tracks, droppings, and feeding areas. "There are definitely animals here," she told Ben when they returned. "Small ones, like rabbits or squirrels, and some bigger tracks too, but they look like they came from plant tedders, not predators." Andy nodded. "He saw some bird-like creatures in the trees. They're probably edible if we can catch them." Back at camp, Rick Palmer was already working on improving their shelter. He had found stones that could be shaped into cutting tools and was showing the others how to make them. You hold the rock like this, Rick explained to Maria Santos, and strike it at an angle. See how it breaks into sharp pieces? These edges can cut through almost anything. Maria tried it herself and smiled when she successfully made her first stone knife. This is actually kind of fun, she said. Meanwhile, 15 miles away, the Zephyrian team was having a very different experience. Admiral Kethmer stood in the center of their camp, looking frustrated as he watched his team struggle with basic tasks. Dr. Yolandra, he called, what is the status of our fire? The scientist looked up from a pile of sticks and dry grass. I understand the theory perfectly, Admiral, but the execution is proving more difficult than expected. The friction method requires precise hand movements that I haven't fully mastered. 2 other Zephyrians were attempting to build a shelter, but their construction kept falling apart. Their forearms should have given them an advantage, but they couldn't coordinate their movements properly for this type of work. This is ridiculous, muttered Captain Zexwell, one of their military officers. We've conquered star systems, and we can't even make a simple fire. Dr. Yolandra tried again with the fire-making sticks. She had studied primitive technology for years and knew exactly what needed to be done. But knowing and doing were very different things. Her hands weren't used to this kind of rough work. She couldn't get the right rhythm. Back at the human camp, Carl Johnson had already started preparing their first meal. He had identified several edible plants using knowledge he'd gained. From cooking shows and camping trips, Susan Miller helped him by testing each plant carefully. This one tastes bitter, Susan said, spitting out a small piece of root. Probably not poisonous, but not very nutritious either. How about this? Carl held up a purple fruit he'd found growing on a low bush. Susan examined it carefully, then took a tiny bite. After a moment, she smiled, sweet and juicy. Good food. By midday, the human camp had transformed into a functioning survival base. They had clean water, a strong fire, weatherproof shelters, and enough food for several days. The team worked together like they had been doing this for years. It's not bad for day 1, Ben said, looking around at their progress. But we need to. Think about the long term. 30 days is a long time. Lisa wiped sweat from her forehead. We should look for more permanent water sources. That stream might dry up if we don't get rain. And we need better hunting tools, added Kate. Those stone knives are good, but we need spears or traps if we want to catch bigger animals. The team spent the afternoon working on improvements. Rick showed them how to make rope from plant fibers, while Andy taught everyone basic knots and construction techniques. Tom organized their medical supplies, which consisted mainly of plants that Lisa had identified as having healing properties, as the suns began to set. The human team gathered around their fire to share their first proper meal on Zarian Prime. It wasn't fancy food: roasted roots, boiled leaves, and some small creatures that Kate had caught in simple traps. But everyone ate with good appetites. You know what's funny? Said Maria, chewing on a piece of cooked root. This reminds me of camping trips I used to take with my family when I was a kid. Same here, agreed Danny, except the gravity's a little different and there are 2 suns. The others laughed. Despite their dangerous situation, the team's mood was surprisingly good. They were tired and dirty, but they felt confident about their chances. Meanwhile, the Zephyrian team was having a much harder time. They had finally managed to start a fire just before sunset, but their shelter was still incomplete. Several team members were showing signs of dehydration and exhaustion. Admiral, said Dr. Yolandra, I recommend we concentrate our efforts on the most essential survival needs: water, shelter, and fire. Everything else can wait. Kethmer nodded grimly. Agreed. We underestimated the physical demands of this challenge. The alien team worked into the night trying to catch up on basic necessities. Their advanced minds could solve complex problems easily, but their bodies weren't adapted for primitive living. Their hands were soft from years of using advanced technology, and they tired quickly from manual labor. On the other side of the valley, the humans were already planning for day 2. Ben assigned tasks for the next morning while the others shared stories and knowledge around the fire. My grandfather taught me to read weather patterns, said Kate, looking up at the strange stars. See how the clouds are moving? We might get rain tomorrow. That's good, replied Lisa. Rain means more water, and probably more plant growth. We should set up containers to collect it. Rick poked the fire with a stick, making sparks fly up into the dark sky. I'm thinking we should start working on permanent structures. If we're going to be here for 30 days, we might as well be comfortable. The conversation continued late into the night, with team members sharing skills and knowledge. Tom talked about wilderness first aid, while Susan explained how to identify nutritious plants. Andy described techniques for finding and purifying water, and Carl shared methods for preserving and cooking food. As they finally settled down to sleep, Ben felt cautiously optimistic. Day 1 had gone better than expected. His team was working well together. They had secured their basic needs, and morale was high. But he also knew that Zarian Prime would test them in ways they hadn't faced yet. The real challenges were still coming. In their camp across the valley, the Zephyrians finally managed to complete a basic shelter just hours before dawn. They were exhausted, dehydrated, and already behind schedule. Admiral Kethmer stared at the human camp's distant fire and wondered how the primitive species was managing so well. What he didn't understand was that for humans, this wasn't just a survival test. It was something their ancestors had been doing for hundreds of thousands of years, and unlike the Zephyrians, they had never really stopped. By the end of the second week, the human camp looked like a small village. Ben Clark stood on a rocky hill overlooking their settlement, amazed at what his team had accomplished. What had started as a basic survival camp was now becoming something much more impressive. Below him, Rick Palmer was teaching Danny Price how to weave baskets from plant fibers. They had discovered that certain local plants had strong, flexible stems that could be twisted into rope and woven into containers. The baskets were not only useful for carrying food and water, but they also showed that the humans were thinking beyond simple survival. Rick, these baskets are incredible, Danny said, holding up his finished work. My grandmother used to make baskets like this back on Earth. The technique is almost the same, Rick replied. Funny how the same methods work on different worlds. Near the stream, Lisa Hayes was working with Tom Rogers to create what they called their medicine garden. They had transplanted several healing plants closer to their camp and were experimenting with different ways to prepare them. Lisa had found plants that could reduce pain, stop bleeding, and fight infections. This root works great for headaches, Lisa explained to Tom as she crushed dried plant material with stones. And this leaf can be made into a tea that helps with stomach problems. Tom nodded as he carefully organized their growing collection of medicines. It's like having a pharmacy right here in the wilderness. Kate Williams had become the camp's master hunter and scout. She had not only learned the habits of local animals, but she had also begun to domesticate some of the smaller creatures. A group of rabbit-like animals now lived near the camp, serving as both food source and early warning system for predators. The little ones get nervous when big animals are around, Kate explained to Andy Chen as they watched the creatures feeding. If they all suddenly run and hide, we know something dangerous is coming. Andy was impressed. That's brilliant. A natural alarm system. The humans had also made significant improvements to their shelters. What had started as simple windbreaks were now solid structures with waterproof roofs and comfortable sleeping areas. Rick had shown them how to make a kind of concrete from local clay and crushed stone, which they used to build permanent walls. Susan Miller had taken charge of food production and storage. She had not only identified dozens of edible plants, but she had also started experimenting with primitive agriculture. In a cleared area near their camp, she was growing some of the most nutritious local plants. "Look at this," Susan said excitedly to Carl Johnson, pointing to rows of green shoots emerging from the soil. "I planted these seeds just 5 days ago, and they're already growing." Carl examined the plants carefully. "If these keep growing this fast, we'll have fresh vegetables for the rest of our time here." The human camp had also become a place of learning and creativity. In the evenings, team members would gather around their fire to share knowledge and stories. Maria Santos had started keeping a detailed record of everything they learned, writing on flat stones with charcoal from their fire. Future human teams might need this information, Maria explained as she carefully wrote down Lisa's notes about local plants. "We should leave them a guide." But the most impressive development was how the humans had begun to think of Zarian Prime as more than just a survival challenge. They were starting to treat it like a potential home. Andy had mapped the entire valley and identified the best locations for different activities. Tom had started a tool-making workshop where team members could create specialized equipment.
And we're
Not just surviving, Ben told his team during one of their evening meetings. We're actually living here. The transformation was visible from space. Captain Jake Morrison watched the drone footage from his ship, barely believing what he saw. The human camp now covered a large area and showed signs of permanent construction. Gardens, workshops, storage areas, and living spaces were all clearly organized and well-built. Not just surviving, Jake said to Lieutenant Brooks. They're building a civilization. Look at this, Amy replied, pointing to another screen. Kate has domesticated local animals. Susan is farming, and Rick has invented new construction techniques. In 2 weeks, they've accomplished more than some colonies do in months. Meanwhile, the Zephyrian camp was struggling more each day. Admiral Kethmer sat in their poorly constructed shelter, looking at reports from his team members. The news was not good. Admiral, said Dr. Yolandra, we're facing serious problems. 3 of our team members are showing signs of malnutrition, and 2 others have injuries that aren't healing properly. Captain Zexwell entered the shelter, his uniform torn and dirty. The hunting expedition failed again. These primitive weapons are impossible to use effectively. Kethmer felt frustration building inside him. His team was made up of some of the finest minds in the Zephyrian Empire, yet they couldn't master basic survival skills. They understood the science behind everything they needed to do, but they couldn't translate that knowledge into practical action. Perhaps we should focus on defense, suggested Dr. Yolandra. The human team appears to be thriving. They might try to attack us. No, Kethmer said firmly. The humans have made no aggressive moves. They're simply better at this than we expected. The Admiral walked outside and looked across the valley toward the human camp. Even from this distance, he could see the smoke from their fires and the movement of people working on various projects. The contrast with his own struggling team was painful to observe. Back at the human camp, the team was dealing with their own challenges, but in a very different way. A pack of large predators had been spotted near their territory, and they needed to develop better defenses. These creatures are about the size of earth wolves, Kate reported to the group. They hunt in packs and seem to be curious about our camp. Instead of panicking, the humans approached this as just another problem to solve. Andy and Rick worked together to design better spears and defensive barriers. Tom prepared medical supplies in case of injuries. Lisa researched which local plants might be used to create repellent scents. We could build a fence around the camp, suggested Danny. Use those thorny bushes Kate found. Good idea, Ben agreed. But let's also think about early warning systems. We want to know if they're coming before they get close. The solution they developed was both simple and effective, using techniques that humans had used for thousands of years. They created a perimeter defense system with noisemakers, scent barriers, and clear sight lines. When the predators did approach a few days later, the humans were ready. The pack of 6 wolf-like creatures circled the camp cautiously, but the human defenses worked perfectly. The noisemakers alerted the team, the scent barriers confused the animals, and the clear sightlines allowed Kate and Andy to drive them off with spears and loud shouts. That was actually kind of exciting, Maria said after the predators had disappeared. Speak for yourself, replied Carl, who had been hiding behind the water storage containers. But I have to admit, our defenses worked great. The successful defense against the predators marked another turning point for the human team. They realized that they weren't just surviving on Zarian Prime, they were mastering it. Every challenge the planet threw at them became an opportunity to learn and improve. Commander Vexera watched the drone footage from his ship with growing amazement and concern. The human team wasn't just passing the survival test. They were excelling at it in ways he had never seen before. How is this possible? He asked his science officer. They're using primitive tools and methods, yet they've created a more advanced settlement than some of our own colonies. Perhaps, the science officer suggested carefully, we have underestimated the human species. Vexera studied the images of the human camp. Gardens, workshops, domesticated animals, defensive systems, and signs of artistic expression were all visible. These weren't the actions of a desperate species trying to survive. Okay, these were the actions of a species that had never really forgotten how to live as their ancestors had. Continue monitoring, Vexera ordered. I want to see how this develops. As the third week began, both teams faced new challenges. But only one team was ready for whatever Zarian Prime might throw at them next. The storm came without warning on the 26th day. 8. Williams was the first to notice the strange clouds gathering on the horizon. They moved differently than normal weather, twisting and spinning in unnatural patterns. Ben, you need to see this, Kate called from her lookout post on the hill above their camp. Ben Clark climbed up to join her and immediately understood her concern. The clouds were dark purple, almost black, and they covered half the sky. Lightning flashed inside them, but it was the wrong color, bright green instead of white. That doesn't look like normal weather, Ben said. No, it doesn't, and it's moving fast. Within an hour, the storm was overhead. The wind hit first, howling across the valley with incredible force. The humans quickly secured their camp, tying down everything that could blow away and taking shelter in their strongest buildings. Everyone stay inside, Ben shouted over the wind. This is going to be bad. The storm was unlike anything they had experienced on Earth. The wind carried strange particles that stung exposed skin, and the green lightning struck the ground repeatedly. The temperature dropped rapidly, and a freezing rain began to fall. But the human camp was ready. Their solid shelters held against the wind, their stored food and water kept them fed, and their warm clothes protected them from the cold. They had built their settlement to last, and it was surviving the storm, 15 miles away. The Zephyrian camp was in serious trouble. Their poorly constructed shelters were falling apart in the wind, and several team members were already showing signs of dangerous exposure to the cold. Admiral Kethmer tried to hold their main shelter together as the wind tore at its walls. Dr. Yolandra, how much longer will this storm last? I don't know, the scientist replied, shivering violently. Our weather prediction methods aren't working on this planet. Captain Zexwell stumbled into the shelter, his blue skin now pale. With cold, Admiral, we're losing the food storage area. The wind destroyed it completely. Kethmer felt despair growing in his chest. His team was barely surviving normal conditions. This storm might kill them all. As the storm continued through the night, the Zephyrian situation became desperate. 2 team members collapsed from hypothermia, and their fire was repeatedly blown out by the wind. By morning, they were facing death. At the human camp, Ben was making a difficult decision. The storm was beginning to calm down, and his team was safe. But he had been monitoring the Zephyrian camp through the night, and he knew they were in trouble. We can't just let them die, Ben told his team, as they gathered in their main shelter. But they're our competition, Andy Chen pointed out. If they fail, we win automatically. Is that how we want to win? Ben asked. By watching people die when we could help them? Lisa Hayes nodded firmly. Ben's right. We can't let people freeze to death just because they're aliens. Besides, added Kate Williams, helping them doesn't mean we lose. The test is about survival, not about killing the other team. Rick Palmer was already gathering supplies. If we're going to do this, we need to move fast. That storm did a lot of damage and they might not have much time. Ben made the final decision. Tom, Lisa, and Kate, you're with me. We'll take medical supplies and emergency shelter materials. The rest of you stay here and secure our camp. The rescue mission was dangerous. The storm had left the landscape changed, with new streams, fallen rocks, and unstable ground. But the humans moved carefully across the valley using skills they had developed over the past 3 weeks when they reached the Zephyrian camp. The situation was worse than Ben had expected. The alien shelters were completely destroyed. Their supplies were scattered by the wind, and 3 team members were unconscious from cold exposure. Admiral Kethmer looked up in surprise as the humans approached. His proud military bearing was gone, replaced by desperate relief. Why are you here? Kethmer asked weakly. To help, Ben replied simply. Tom, check the unconscious ones. Lisa, see what medical supplies we can use. Kate helped me set up emergency shelter. The humans worked quickly and efficiently, treating the injured Zephyrians and providing them with warm clothes and food. Tom used his medical training to treat hypothermia, while Lisa prepared warming drinks from her collection of medicinal plants. I don't understand, Admiral Kethmer said, as Ben wrapped a thermal blanket around him. We are your enemies in this competition. Why risk your own lives to save us? Ben paused in his work. Because that's what people do. When someone needs help, you help them. Competition doesn't mean we let each other die. Dr. Yolandra, who had been unconscious for hours, slowly opened her eyes. Are we... Are we prisoners? No, Lisa said gently, offering her a cup of warm tea. You're safe. We brought medical supplies and emergency shelter. The Zephyrian scientists stared at Lisa in confusion. But we're supposed to be fighting each other. We were competing, Kate corrected, not fighting. There's a difference. The humans spent the entire day helping the Zephyrian team recover from the storm. They shared food, medical supplies, and even some of their advanced survival techniques. By evening, the aliens were stable and no longer in immediate danger. As the rescue team prepared to return to their own camp, Admiral Kethmer approached. Ben, I must ask you something, human. How did your species become so skilled at survival? We have studied primitive techniques for years, yet you surpass us easily. Ben thought for a moment. I think it's because we never really stopped being primitive. Even with all our technology, humans still go camping and hiking for fun. Teach our children to build fires and find water. It's part of who we are. But why? Dr. Yolandra asked. Why maintain such ancient skills when you have advanced technology? Because they're fun, Lisa replied with a smile. And because you never know when you might need them. The next morning, observers from both ships watched as the 30-day test period officially ended. Both teams were still alive, but the difference in their conditions was dramatic. The human team stood confidently in their thriving settlement, surrounded by gardens, workshops, and comfortable homes. They looked healthy, well-fed, and relaxed. Some of them were even smiling. The Zephyrian team huddled together in temporary shelters, still recovering from their near-death experience during the storm. They had survived, but barely, and only. With help from their supposed enemies, Commander Vexthera materialized on the planet's surface via transporter beam, along with Captain Jake Morrison. The two leaders stood between the camps, preparing to announce the results of the test. This competition has revealed much about both species, Vexthera began. The Zephyrian Empire has used this test for over 1,000 years to evaluate other civilizations. In that time, we have never seen results like these. He gestured toward the human settlement. Not only did the human team survive, they created a functioning civilization. They domesticated local animals, developed agriculture, built permanent structures, and even created art and literature. Jake Morrison felt pride swelling in his chest as he looked at his people. But more importantly, Vexthera continued, they demonstrated something we did not expect. When faced with the choice between victory and compassion, they chose compassion. They risked their own success to save their competitors. The Zephyrian commander turned to address both teams directly. The human species has passed this test in ways that surpassed our understanding. You have shown that advancement and primitive skills can coexist. You have proven that technology does not require the loss of basic survival abilities. Admiral Kethmer stepped forward, still weak, but determined to speak. Commander Vexthera, I recommend that the Zephyrian Empire withdraw our territorial claims in this sector. The human species has earned the right to explore and settle here through their demonstrated capabilities. I agree, Vexthera replied. But more than that, I propose that we offer the human species partnership rather than subjugation. Your unique combination of advanced technology and retained primitive skills could benefit our entire empire. Morrison stepped forward to respond. We'd be honored to discuss peaceful cooperation, Commander, but I have one condition. What condition? Jake smiled. Next time you want to test a species, maybe try a technology-based challenge instead? Hey, we've gotten pretty good at that too. Commander Vexthera made the sound that passed for laughter among his species. Agreed, Captain Morrison. We have learned much from this experience. As both teams prepared to leave Zarian Prime, Ben Clark took one last look at the settlement they had built. In 30 days, they had created something remarkable. Not just a survival camp, but a home. "Think we'll ever come back here?" Kate asked, joining him on the hill. "Maybe," Ben replied. "It's a good planet. With the right preparation, humans could really make something special here." "We already did," Kate said, gesturing to their thriving settlement below. "We already did." The test was over, but its impact would last much longer. The Zephyrian Empire had learned that true strength came not just from technology, but from the ability to adapt and survive in any conditions. And humanity had proven that they belonged among the stars, carrying with them the ancient skills that had helped them survive on Earth for hundreds of thousands of years. Some things, it turned out, should never be forgotten.